Yes, good morning everyone, and welcome to our 12th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. On this first day, dedicated mainly to capacity building, and we really will have a slightly more formal opening tomorrow morning with speakers from various organizations and sponsors. But for today, it's more a question of learning something and making sure that everyone is on the same page as we go forward to the discussions over the next couple of days after this. So we will hear in this short opening some words of wisdom from our host, the Public Utilities Commission, represented by Chairman John Avery. And my name is Nigel Castamere. I am the telecommunications specialist with the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the main convener of the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. And our Secretary General, Ms. Bernadette Lewis, will address the gathering tomorrow morning, and she will talk a bit about what we've done over the years of the CIGF and so on. But given the time and the fact that our main purpose today is making sure that we introduce the topics to everyone, and everyone in the room might not have the same background as some of the experts among us. So we've fashioned a day where we start with some basic concepts, and then we get into explanations of how the internet works and some of the key issues that are relevant to the operation of today's internet. And you will have the opportunity to interact with the expert speakers who would be presenting these topics. So without further ado, as mentioned, we'll get into more formalities, a few more formalities tomorrow. I would just like to invite Chairman John Avery from our host organization here in Belize, the Belize Public Utilities Commission, to address us, and I think he has some words of encouragement for the locals as well. So please welcome Mr. John Avery.
Good morning. Thank you, Nigel. Let me just say it's an honor for us at the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, to play host to this 12th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. It was in March of this year, I think, at the Caribbean Stakeholders Meeting, where we were discussing many of the issues and matters that will be discussed during this event, that Bernadette Lewis asked us to host this event. At the Commission, we felt it was a unique opportunity for us. We had intended to hold our own event in the first week of November of last year. And many of the faces that are here, we had discussed about inviting to facilitate our event. Well, I wouldn't say unfortunately, clash of scheduling, elections were called, general elections were called for that same week, and so we had to cancel. So when Bernadette asked if we could host this for CIGF, we at the Commission felt it was a good opportunity for us. This would feed directly into our original plans. And so my real purpose here this morning in front of you is to basically give a message to the local participants, the local attendees. Unfortunately, I don't see as much shared at this moment as I would have hoped to see. However, we have been assured that we'll have more participation over the course of the 3-day event. In effect, what I wanted, the message I wanted to give particularly to the local participants is that the PUC intends to do a follow-up to this 12 CIGF for locals with the purpose of trying to bridge the gap between where we are in terms of policy framework for influence governance and the work of the CTU. So I would like to encourage all the local participants to pay keen attention to what we're discussing this week, to attend as much of the sessions as possible, and while you're doing so, to think about your particular sector or environment that you operate in and see where the gaps lie, so that down the road, when the PUC takes the initiative to organize a local event to implement all of it, well, not all, but the appropriate policies of the CTU and the CIGF, then we'll be in a better position to do so. I will be here tomorrow morning saying the same thing. We Belize, we find ourselves in a unique position where historically and ethnically we were more aligned with the Caribbean and geographically with the Central America. And we've kind of chosen a path of being a part of both. And that in some regard has left us a bit isolated from each group when compared to the other members of each group. And I feel it's the same way we've approached a lot of what we do, including internet governance. And so we're very welcome to Canberra throughout this year, and hopefully we can catch up quickly to the rest of the Caribbean in terms of implementing the laws and the appropriate policies to see a more productive, a more open and a more safe internet for all the users. So with that, I'd like to thank you. And one last thing, I would just like to say thanks to the members of staff of the PUC who helped to organize and deal with all the logistics for this event. I think you've gone beyond what was expected of you, and so I'd like to give personal thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Chairman Avery. I hope the Belizeans in the room took note of his urging, and also you can take the message to persons outside the room who you can encourage to come for the latter part of today and the 2 days to come for tomorrow. I just also like to recognize the Honorable Vanessa Rittridge, Attorney General for Belize, who is joining us today in the audience. Thank you very much for coming. Okay, just before we get in, I think we like to recognize our sponsors for the event, and we have some traditional sponsors and we have some local sponsors. The traditional sponsors, 5 actually, and the logos are shown on the banner there. We have Google, LACNIC, that's the Latin American and Caribbean Internet Addresses Registry. ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, Internet Society, and ARIN, the American Registry for Internet Numbers. They've been pretty much annual supporters of this CIGF event, and we thank them and very grateful, in fact, for the help that they've been giving us over the years. And I think the fact that they have repeatedly sponsored the proceedings over the, well, very many years, probably not from the very first year, I think is a testimony to the fact that there are benefits being derived from the work of this Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. Chairman Avery made mention of the policies and so on. These are, out of the work of the forum over the years, we've documented and compiled a Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework, which is like the collective wisdom of the group, this multi-stakeholder group over the years. And we would have had inputs from stakeholders in government, private sector, civil society over the years. And over the next 3 days, we'll be getting words of wisdom, opinions, comments from persons in all of these groups. Our focus here is accelerating the Caribbean internet development, and there'll be various topics that we are handling over the time. So I would like to get started into the meat of the presentations now, and we'll start with the ABCs. And the first speaker is going to take us through that. He's well known around the Caribbean, Mr. Bevel Wooding, and he is an internet strategist with the Packet Clearinghouse. And Packet Clearinghouse is a non-profit research institute that supports operations and analysis in the areas of internet traffic exchange, internet routing, economics, and global network development. Bevel wears many hats, however, and he's also the Global Director and Chief Knowledge Officer of Congress WBN, which is a non-profit organization comprising networks of professional groups, education institutions, businesses, churches, and university students from 85 nations around the world. He's worked closely with organizations regionally and internationally in the public and private sector, most particularly the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, to leverage the power of ICTs, and he's been a strong advocate in developing countries for the adoption of the internet and internet-based technologies as a tool for corporate, economic, and social transformation. We always heckle him that he's one of those with the key to the internet, even though we don't quite understand exactly what that means. But I think he's well qualified to bring the jargon to the people, bring it down and explain it in a way that that we can understand. I realize I neglected to, just before I bring Bevel on, I realize that now I neglected in talking about the sponsors to also mention that for this particular event that we have local sponsors as well. Apart from our local hosts, the PUC, which we want to recognize, we also want to recognize local gold sponsors, Alliance IP and .BZ, and local silver sponsors, Centaur Cablevision and Coral Cablevision. So all of these are helping to make this particular edition of the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum a success, and we thank all of you for supporting. So, having introduced Bevel, I will now ask him to come forward and take us through his initial presentation of the ABCs. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Nigel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of my colleagues at the head table. While we get the PowerPoint set up, let me give some context to this presentation. This is the second year that we're actually running this ABCs of Internet Governance. And the idea is simple. We recognize that for those in the industry, those who have been participating in multi-stakeholder fora like these across the region, normally take for granted the amount of acronyms and terminology and concepts that go around the issues of internet governance. And what this presentation attempts to do, much like the agenda for today, is to break down the terms and to look behind some of the concepts that surround this for some mysterious world of internet governance. And so my presentation is simply titled The ABCs of Internet Governance. I'm going to look through the why and the what of internet governance. We'll discuss, and again, this is all overview, so we'll discuss in summary some of the key actors. We'll be looking at the fundamental concepts and then looking at the acronyms that you'll be hearing over the course of the next few days, including, and this is not the right one, including the some of the issues that surround economic and policy development. Give me 1 second, please. All right, so why internet governance? Why are we here? Why are there fora like these? This is the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. I think earlier last month there was a Latin American and the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. The Pacific region has their own forum, and then everyone gets together normally toward the end of the year for the Global Internet Governance Forum. And one of the reasons that these discussion points are important is, as we all know, the internet is playing an increasingly significant role in all aspects of life. And many people take for granted how the internet is managed, how is it governed. And so, for those who have any intersection with the internet, whether at the policy level, whether at the infrastructure support level, whether as consumers, as parents, as civil society actors, knowing what's going on and who makes the decisions that determine how the internet arrives in some jurisdiction or some country or some locale and how it gets managed is important. And so these fora, and interestingly, a little bit of history, fast fact, is the Caribbean had the first such forum. So this region, this 12th Internet Governance Forum came 1 year before the Global Internet Governance Forum began. And the document that we'll be looking at over the course of the next few days, the Caribbean Internet Governance Framework document, is one of the first documents that attempt to put not just concepts, but policy that can lead to action in place. And so the region is actually ahead as it relates to looking at the issues of the internet and why it requires national responses and why it requires regional responses that then feed into the global response. So what is internet governance? The term that you'll be hearing over and over the next few days. This definition comes from, and I'll give you your first acronym, WISIS, the World Information Summit on the Information Society. And they say internet governance is a development and application by governments, by the private sector, and civil society in their respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the internet. So essentially anything that impacts the introduction, management, and the expansion of the internet is covered under the term internet governance. All of the actors, all of the policies, all of the issues surrounding are covered under this umbrella of internet governance. And I'm sure you can quickly see that this means there are a lot of things and a lot of issues, and in often cases a lot of contention around what are norms and what are the shared principles and what are the values that should attend the internet in any region. And you all may have noticed in a lot of the international conflicts, one of the first things to be taken off the grid is the internet, people's access to social media. And then in other regions, the whole celebration of free speech and the ability to say and act and respond in any way online is held up as a virtue. For international internet governance, these positions have to be reconciled. And so how the internet gets managed is a combination of the telecommunications infrastructure. So Nigel said, somewhat in jest, that I hold a key, not the key, to the internet. There are a set of technical and infrastructural components that make up the internet. But then there are also some standards that determine how information is passed over the internet. But then there's also the actual content and applications, your Facebook site, your Twitter account, your email that live on top of that infrastructure. And all of these layers have to be governed, managed, kept in a state of equilibrium so that consumers' efforts to consume applications and services is supported by the technical community's efforts to manage, support, and maintain those services. The actors in this broad world include everyone from governments and international organizations. The United Nations, for example, is the main host of the Global Internet Governance Forum. But it also includes the private sector, academia, civil society, the technical community, including organizations like those here in this room, ISOC and ICANN and ARID, all of whom we'll be looking at as we proceed. So there's this diagram that you will see online, which kind of shows the internet as a cobble of structures and institutions and issues and protocols all being built up in what is called the bottom-up approach, not by any top-down agency. No government runs the internet, though many wish they could, but neither does any single organization. And so you have this ecosystem of actors working together to create what has become the greatest innovation that mankind has seen, particularly in this time. The infrastructure component involves telecommunications infrastructure, key network protocols, and you'll hear some of them like TCP/IP or IPv6, and the domain name system itself, which is like the address book of the internet. Very important part of the infrastructure is how do those websites that we love and go to, how do they get resolved back into machine readable addresses? And there's a whole group looking at that and that alone, and looking at how it gets managed and supported. And then there are the root servers that basically tell machines on the internet where to find other machines on the internet. But then there are a host of other legal issues. So we have the infrastructure and a whole group of, let's call them the techno internet nerd types who live and breathe down inside of the protocols and the infrastructure and the equipment of the internet. But because the internet touches so many aspects of life, there is a legal layer, legal aspect. That includes things like jurisdiction. If I have my data on a server or a computer in the United States, whose laws am I subject to if that data is holding Belize content or Jamaica content? And these issues of jurisdiction, intellectual property rights, are very contentious, very important issues that also fall under the umbrella of internet governance. Then you have cybercrime, most of which does not take place in any specific jurisdiction, and most of which involve what is called cross-border incidents. And so cybercrime and dealing with cybercrime now also becomes a matter of internet governance, because agencies in different jurisdictions have to work together, not just to identify, but to actually deal with the threats and the transgressions of malicious actors on the internet. So one of the main issues that will come up in any internet governance forum will be this issue of cybercrime. How do we track it? How do we manage it? How do we respond to it? I can give you a simple example of a case in Grenada some years ago, actually 2 years ago, where there was a threat to a government official via email. And the government official had a suspicion of who the person making the threat was, but because the email address was a Gmail account, the matter could not be dealt with in Grenada. A letter had to be written to the US Attorney General, who then had to request of Google access to the server before it could come back to Grenada. And those are real issues, because now law enforcement officers in one jurisdiction have to find channels to track down a crime that, even though it's targeting a national, is not actually originating within the jurisdiction. And those are big issues of international cooperation and also of legislation and policy that surround internet governance as well. And then of course you have privacy and data protection, which is related. If my server is in the United States and subject to the Patriot Act or some other act that gives the US government authorization to monitor, track, interrogate that data without my knowledge because it's in their jurisdiction, how private is private in a local context. And all of these things connect, as you'll see. Infrastructure, which we spoke about a few minutes ago, depending on where your data resides, and we'll hear another term later on, cloud computing, the cloud always has an anchored physical space. And that physical space always lives in a physical legal jurisdiction. So the cloud is not amorphous, it's not abstract. It's actually in someone's legal territory and subject to someone's legal frameworks. So all of these issues connect, and that's why I describe it as layers. The infrastructure, legal aspect of it, but also the socio-cultural aspect of it, the human rights, the cultural safety. We've had several cases, for example, in the region, where someone will make a statement like, I have freedom of speech. No, you don't. You saw that on TV, most likely from US programming. Check your laws. You may not be actually entitled to the level of freedom of speech that you think you are. But you have access through the internet. And remember, the internet is not just your web pages, it brings the actual television and radio content as well into our country. And so there are a lot of issues around people's awareness of what are in fact their rights by law, and what in fact are their rights generally. What does it mean for child safety? Pornography is a huge issue in the Caribbean. And some of it actually facilitated by government programs, such as free laptops in schools without the necessary boundaries and necessary conditionalities for how access is controlled. And you also have the issues of multilingualism, cultural diversity, and the rights of the differently abled. All of these fall under, again, the umbrella of internet governance debates. And I'm sure for many of us in this room, even if we would not have considered ourselves as internet governance specialists, we have opinions on these issues. We are users of the internet. We consume content that is normally accessed via the internet. And what these issues ultimately boil down to from a governance standpoint is actually a function of the voices that lend themselves to shaping that global debate. And that global debate normally starts as a national discussion, or in our case for the CIGF, a regional discussion. And the more informed we are, the better we can dialogue around these issues. And that leads me to the issue of policy. Look here at just the examples of internet interconnection, how our networks connect and interconnect. And one of the big issues right now, for example, that we'll be looking at over the next few days is over-the-top services. Net neutrality, again, terms that you'll hear that actually boil down into specific actions that have to be taken at a national level, at a policy-making level. A number of our Caribbean consumers are very familiar with these services. What they're not familiar with is the economics behind the services. The things that allow for Amazon to deliver its video to a consumer in Corozal or in Kingston, Jamaica. And there is a raging debate right now from the internet service providers across the region about exactly how neutral should neutral be. We have networks to protect, traffic to monitor, network stability to ensure, the argument goes on the ISP side. Therefore, we can't let any and everything pass over our network if it is going to spoil the quality of service. So goes their side of it. But then on the other side is the consumer who says, but we need a free and open internet. We need to be able to consume the content that we want, when we want, how we want it, without your intervention or without your saying how much it should be managed or throttled based on your network needs. Again, a decision to reconcile. Both have a point. The question is, what's the right and balanced response for the region, given all of these concerns? So that's an issue of policy. And it's an issue that if left unchecked, for example, private sector interest will always go for the path that leads to the greatest profit. Public policy interest will always seek the path that leads to the greatest social benefit. And we have to find those equilibrium points in our internet governance forum. Everybody's tracking with me? Yeah. So let's take a look at some key concepts. I'm getting a bit of feedback. Yeah, so let's take a look at some key concepts. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but I'm going to try to find the points that will be most germane or most relevant to our discussions here this week. One key concept is the digital divide. this is a term that has been around for some time now, and it's one that seems to be very difficult to address, certainly to close. And the digital divide essentially describes the gulf or the gap between those who already have access to technology and to the internet and those who don't. Should I deal with that first? All right, so as you can see, in any territory, in any jurisdiction, there will always be haves and have-nots. The digital divide describes the attempt in the internet governance community to ensure that as many people as possible have as much